Welcome to Women of Green. Hi, I'm Carolyn. I have with me today my guest. I'm very honored to have her on Women of Green today, Elizabeth Lindsey. She's the first female National Geographic Fellow, an award-winning documentary filmmaker and anthropologist. Her documentary, And Then There Were None, chronicles the near extinction of native Hawaiians and is considered a classic history film in Hawaii. Welcome.
Thank you.
It's really an honor to be here with you.
Thank you. The
Yeah.
pleasure's mine.
You have an uncanny way of creating amazing sacred space in a room filled with 2,000 people. I have had a chance to witness that, and you could hear a pin drop. And it was so moving to me. So the question I'd like to ask you is, what do you know that we need to know in this time we're in right now? I'm going to cry.
Oh, well, I'll tell you. Thank you, first of all. But, you know, I don't know any more than anyone else, except that I had the rare privilege of having been raised by elders who had great wisdom in them. And if there's anything that I can offer, it's their wisdom.
You know, when you talked about having the ancestors with you and with us, I would say it was the first time yesterday that it went from my mind of saying, oh, they're here, to really feeling the presence yesterday. And I have to thank you for just what you're doing on this planet right now and how we need it. Might you think that the women's role is in this critical time we're in right now?
It's a very important one. We knew, they always talked about the fact that this was a critical period of time. But the women who raised me were very specific about this period, and they talked about the fact that we would be in such a state of crisis, economically, in terms of political conflict. Even though they didn't use those words, they talked about wars and rumors of war, natural disasters, and were very specific. They also talked about the fact that women's voices would rise, because what the world would need would be wisdom and influence. And there's something to consider about the notion of language, because we often hear people say, oh, they made such a great impact, they had such a great impact. And all of a sudden now, we're reconsidering that language and saying, their influence is great. Because there's something so aggressive and so hard about the notion of impact. Something like an accident. And all of a sudden we really have to consider that as women we're rising. As I travel around the world, I see more and more women rising up, not out of choice so much, but out of necessity. That they are serving as the glue in their communities. An Indian chief once told me, the women bleed into the earth, and they are grounded and rooted in a way that men can't be. And I prefer not to see this so much as a gender issue, but an opportunity for us to really call a greater balance into this period. And that's what women offer.
Yes.
Is the ability to see not only their own needs, but the needs of their children, and envision the needs of their descendants. Men certainly have that ability as well, but I think that there's something that it's innate in us as women to have that perspective.
Yes. You know, my question has always been, how do we rally the women? The woman that's in the mall, and the woman that's the soccer mom out there.
Yeah.
And you just identified, I think, probably the key place is our children, our homes, what we give birth to and what we're giving birth to.
Absolutely, because I love being with women. I'm inspired by the work that I see them doing. I'm also, when I come back to this society, I see women that are struggling. In Micronesia, where I was on this very remote island, I went without seeing a mirror because there are no mirrors on the island. And can you imagine being a woman, being completely liberated? These women loved themselves, loved their bodies. 90 years old, missing most of their teeth, breasts down to their waist, and were the most sensuous. And loved themselves. And as soon as I got back on a plane, the re-entry of that expedition was hard for me. Because when I got back on a plane, the first magazine cover that I saw was one of Britney Spears having shaved her head, and I remember feeling so undone by the fact that I'd been out of that arena for long enough that my psyche needed to recalibrate, it needed to readjust. It felt like an assault. And I believe that when we start to really name it, our ability to be as women, be strong and be powerful, know that we are brilliant without excuse, without fear of being criticized for standing up as we are,
Yes.
and for naming things and calling it. There are many conversations I'm sure we could have around the subject of women, but I am inspired by every woman that I see, and it breaks my heart when I see women exhausted and depleted and overwhelmed, and their plates are full. I identify with it.
Yes, so do I.
And I think we have to find a way, when we start talking about conservation of resources, to look at that issue before we can talk about anything else. Talk about women caring for themselves, how we can care for one another in order to really show up in the world. There's a Hawaiian term, and it's called a wahine o ma'o. And what it is, in our mythic goddesses, gods and goddesses, there was a goddess called Hi'iaka. And when she would go into battle, there was a woman that stood beside her and carried her swords and pulled out whatever sword she needed to go into battle. And my sister said to me, every woman needs a wahine o ma'o. And I believe we need to be that for one another, so that when one of us, when one of our sisters is exhausted and fatigued and her bones are weary, that we can stand beside her, both metaphorically and literally, and give her strength.
That is absolutely beautiful. Thank you.
Oh.
Wow. Wahine.
Wahine o ma'o.
Wahine Oma'o.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Oh, the pleasure is mine.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
I will have all of Elizabeth's links and her film on Women of Green. You can go to womenofgreen.com, and of course our Facebook page, you can catch us too. So thank you again, Elizabeth. You opened my heart, and I think the medicine that we all also need, what you exude, is the sacred space that feeds us and nourishes us and gives us strength to get back up and dust ourselves off and continue with the work in the world. You know, and that's part of your message here. I'm just going to say that because you did that for so many of us today, and continue on in the way you're doing it. So thank you, and remember, we are all in this together.